Much for all of our collective introductions. Feel free to utilize the chat for any ongoing commentary, and please adhere to our community guidelines. I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening. Dr. Leon C. Prieto will examine social entrepreneurship from the lens of cooperative advantage, an approach rooted in Africana history and philosophy that describes the benefits that an organization possesses and accrues due to its people-centered approach to development and sustainability. Dr. Prieto is a professor of management and the director of the Center of Social Innovation and Sustainable Entrepreneurship in the College of Business at Clayton State University. He also serves as a research fellow at Cambridge Center for Social Innovation, University of Cambridge Judge Business School. He holds a Ph.D. in Human Resource and Leadership Development from Louisiana State, an ALM in Extension Studies, History with a Graduate Certificate in Social Justice from Harvard University, an Executive Certificate in Leading Sustainable Corporations from Oxford University, an MBA from Georgia Southern University, and a BSc in Management from Claflin University. I don't know if I pronounced the last one correctly. Hopefully I did. I want to show my strong appreciation for you joining us this evening. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Greetings, everyone. So it's such a pleasure to have this conversation with you all today. I would like to request the ability to share my screen. I don't seem to have it at the time, at this present moment. Let's see.
I just gave you host privileges. Try now, if that worked.
Got it now. And you all should see it.
We see it, yep.
Good, good, good. Thank you for that. All right, and someone made a comment about Carnival, so I miss Carnival. And it's a wonderful time to be in Trinidad. So I'm not sure if Janelle was able to make it, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make it, but here I am with you all. And so this is just as good. You could tell I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but that's okay. Well, today I'm going to talk about social entrepreneurship and cooperative advantage. And I'm going to do it from an Africana perspective, right? So I'm a big proponent of, decolonizing the curriculum and things of that nature, right? And I always like to reflect on what is known as SANKOFA, which is an Akan word, which means go back and get it. So there are a number of things we can learn from, Africana history and philosophies as it relates to even things like managing enterprises, like social enterprises, cooperatives, etc. Right? So we can learn from, Black social entrepreneurs during the golden age of Black business. And according to Dr. Juliet Walker, that was a period in American history from 1900 to 1930, where there was prosperity among a number of African-American enterprises, businesses. So there were a number of Black Wall Streets, not just in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but also in different parts of the United States, like Durham, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, etc. So they experienced some goodwill and support and financial performance during that really turbulent period of American history. So they gained that cooperative advantage. And I'm going to give a definition of that a little later on. So this cooperative advantage approach, it stemmed from Africana philosophies of cooperation that survived the Middle Passage into the Americas. So enslaved Africans, they didn't come here lacking their own philosophies and histories and things like that. When we read a lot of American textbooks. They act as if many times we came here without knowing anything at all, you know, but that is false because, you know, there were thriving kingdoms and polities within the continent of Africa, and people had their own belief systems and philosophies, histories, etc. And a number of these things survived into the Americas. So originally I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and we still practice a lot of African traditions that I honestly thought were Trinidadian traditions, but when I did a history and learned about it, I was like, oh, this came from Africa. Like, for example, there's something known as SUSU, which is a rotating savings and credit association. That stemmed from Africa. We have a system in Trinidad known as GAIAP, which means working together for a common goal. So let's say my neighbor needs to renovate his home. People within the community may help that person renovate their home for no money, right? That system came from Africa as a system of cooperation. So some early Black enterprises embody this spirit of cooperation, and they operationalize African traditions, and they sustain their own organizations and their own entrepreneurial ecosystems. And it was a more communitarian and a more just version of capitalism. So a lot of times, you know, we are faced with a more Eurocentric canon. And if we reflect on the work of Dr. Charles W. Mills, he passed away a year or two ago. He's a Jamaican American. He wrote his book called A Racial Contract. And he taught us within his book that the social contract from its very inception was inherently racialized. And it showed how white supremacy fundamentally shaped how Western philosophical thinkers conceive humanity. So basically, the thoughts and the ideas of racialized people were deemed unsuitable. So that's why a number of our traditions and histories didn't make it into a lot of the textbooks, into the classrooms, etc. And then, of course, we experience an economy structured around the racial exploitation of people of African and indigenous descent, you know. So it's time to, you know, decolonize our learning and restore Africana history, indigenous history, as a way to really embrace and enhance our knowledge, our confidence in starting our own enterprises, and a way to motivate us as well to be successful in these endeavors. So very little very little attention has been paid to the histories of enterprise from Africa and many places in the global South. So it's time to decolonize social entrepreneurship and try to utilize a more Africana approach, one that is rooted in African humanism, right? So I define social entrepreneurship as a process of starting and managing an enterprise, not just to make a profit, but it has to be rooted in social justice, and it must make a meaningful difference, one that is authentic and sustainable. It can be for-profit or non-profit, or even a cooperative or B Corp, etc. However, it should work towards creating a regenerative economy, and it must move away from utilizing an extractive business model. And instead, it's to strive to help our community and our planet thrive, right? So a lot of times you may see companies claiming to be B corporations or social enterprises, but they don't really have that social justice element within them. A lot of times they're very extractive, right? And there are even some cooperatives that lack that social justice and solidarity DNA that is needed, you know? So it's very important to always stay rooted in that system of social justice and solidarity. And in a study I conducted some years ago, I found that a number of Black and Latino university students had moderate intention to start in social enterprises. It wasn't high, it was just moderate. And most likely that's because they probably had a lack of knowledge, skills, and abilities to solve some of these pressing problems facing our communities, such as environmental injustices, housing disparities, crime, etc. And it's probably due to a lack of access to capital. But this should not stop us from actually making a difference in this world through social enterprises. There's a way to overcome that, right? But one thing I must stress first, before you start any social enterprise, you must decolonize your mind first and foremost before you seek to really make a difference. Because if um, you are pretty much trained in unbridled capitalism, chances are you may be more motivated to making a profit through via extractive um, measures versus uh, really trying to make a positive, meaningful difference that is rooted in social justice. So you have to decolonize your mind first and foremost. And we must re-engage with Ubuntu, Umuganda, Ujima, and other traditions of cooperation that could help facilitate a more communitarian approach to capitalism, one that better nourishes our shared humanity. So myself and Phipps, my research partner, we define cooperative advantage as the benefits that an organization possesses and accrues due to its people-centered approach to development and sustainability. And this means engendering a spirit of care and community, meaningful dialogue and consensus building among the employees, customers, community, and the entire value chain. So gaining a cooperative advantage means really taking care of the spiritual needs of the people your enterprise hopes to serve, right? And by spiritual, I don't necessarily mean religious, but that whole ethic of care, providing meaningful work for others, helping them reach their full potential, creating jobs that give a sense of purpose and pride, and engendering that greater connection between the social enterprise and the wider community, to really help lift them up, especially during these challenging times. We are facing inflation, and previously we were facing a recession as well. So dialogue needs to be a central part of it as well. Um, you should instill that conversational sensibility among employees where they could bring their full selves at work and for input if they see opportunities to improve the social enterprise. And there must be consensus building as well, right? So you got to utilize the philosophy of Ubuntu and listen to the opinions of employees, customers, and other stakeholders, right? And I mentioned briefly the golden age of Black business, and there's an overlooked person within American history, especially if you study entrepreneurship or management, by the name of Charles Clinton Spaulding. And he is known as the father of African American management, based on some of the research I did. And he played a critical role in the history of management and social entrepreneurship. And his approach was a more Afrocentric approach. He was known as Mr. Cooperation. So as I mentioned, a lot of philosophies of cooperation survived the Middle Passage into the Americas. And it was operationalized by the Black churches, mutual aid societies, early African American cooperatives. And Charles Clinton Spaulding, his first job, one of his first jobs was working for a cooperative. And then he eventually got a job at the North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company, which was a for-profit insurance firm that was very much rooted with that whole spirit of cooperation, right? So he was known as Mr. Cooperation. He managed what was then America's largest Black business. And when W.E.B. Du Bois visited Durham, North Carolina, so they had their own Black Wall Street, he praised the North Carolina Mutual for the emphasis on cooperation over capitalism, right? So he was very impressed because he saw that they were not just about making a profit, but they were really concerned about serving their people, right? So Spalding, he contributed to management and entrepreneurship principles, and he came up with his 4 cardinal points of entrepreneurship that social entrepreneurs today can utilize, right? So he talked about the importance of character, and he stressed that to be successful with our social enterprises, we must be seen as authentic, community-oriented, and have to be a true servant to the cause. So he understood the need for integrity, honesty, and discipline in business. He talked about the importance of having fundamental business principles. So he felt that entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs must have knowledge in a particular area before pursuing it as a business venture. So as a people, we must become more intentional in learning and mastering areas such as renewable energy, urban agriculture, sustainable product development, sustainable tourism, machine learning, etc., before we actually exploit that knowledge we may possess in those areas into forming social enterprises. And he based that on experience because his company diversified into an area they had no experience in, and that enterprise they founded failed, right? So they decided to stick to what they knew, Then cash or its equivalent is also very important to understand cash flow management, and that this is key to managing a business, especially in challenging times such as times of a recession, inflation. So people of African descent oftentimes have to be creative with bootstrapping via personal savings and personal assets, utilizing crowdfunding and startup competitions to bring in some extra cash to keep things going, and also needs to utilize low-cost marketing strategies, etc. And importantly, Spalding also talked about the need for social service in business. So he was one of the first people to talk about that social component, that social justice component that has to be inherent in any social enterprise. So that is key. And this is just an image of W.E.B. Du Bois and Professor William Matney. And they saw the need to teach college students at an HBCU in the 1920s the principles of running a cooperative, a socially minded cooperative. So Professor William Matney, he was one of the first African Americans who graduated from Harvard Business School. And his mentor and inspiration was W.E.B. Du Bois, who has the first African American with his Ph.D. from Harvard. So they saw the need to teach students how to manage a cooperative enterprise in the early 1920s. And a lot of universities in the US today do not teach about cooperatives and other social enterprises. So
excuse me, Professor.
Sure.
Sorry, just we're hearing a little bit of scratchiness from your mic. Yeah, maybe you want to adjust it. Yeah, and let's see how that is.
Do you hear me clearer now?
Yep, that's better. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, so universities in the US really teach about the cooperative business model, and that may need to change, of course. And I have to give a shout out to Dr. Jessica Gordon Nemhard for her work writing a book, Collective Courage, which showed the long history of African Americans in cooperatives, and also the work of Caroline Shanaz Hussein, and others. So if their work is incorporated in a number of different universities, maybe more students will be interested in starting more socially minded enterprises. And that's key. But a lot of young people and lifelong learners may be afraid to start these social enterprises because of access to capital, especially those of us who have um, African descent or indigenous descent. And so many Black founders in the US picked up only 1% of venture capitalist funds, which is abysmal. That's a very low amount. So there are a very small, a small amount of African Americans who are venture capitalists. So because of that, you know, there's a strong likelihood many Black founders may face bias when trying to secure funding. So here are just a couple of examples of places where social entrepreneurs may find funding. So some Black venture capitalist firms that may provide funding to Black social entrepreneurs, Aperture, or Harlem Capital, 1863 Ventures, the Fearless Fund. And there's still a couple of Black banks. There are a number of them where folks could seek funding as well, like One United, Citizens Trust, and there are a number of Black credit unions as well. Not so many, but some of the few that remain are Hope Credit Union, Seaway Credit Union, St. Louis Community Credit Union. And there are a number of other institutions that may fund Black cooperatives and some social enterprises as well, such as the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, Echo and Green, and there are a number of others as well, right? So there are some challenges when it comes to getting funding. And some other challenges social enterprises may face, especially during time of inflation or recession. Um, and a way to really counterattack that or to deal with that may be for that social entrepreneur to adjust prices during a time of inflation or recession, right? So during times of inflation, everything is expensive. And during times of recession, there may be very little economic activity taking place. People may not want to spend. So there's a need to really adjust prices if you're a social entrepreneur, right? So adjust those prices in order for you to achieve a profit, in order for you to achieve your social mission. Then you may also need to find ways to cut costs. So social entrepreneurs may need to review their expenses and cut costs where possible, maybe by renegotiating with suppliers or reducing staff hours if absolutely necessary, right? And there may be also be the need to collaborate with other enterprises as well to achieve economies of scale. So social entrepreneurs can pool resources with other small businesses to reduce costs by sharing expenses in terms of purchasing supplies in bulk. And especially in time of inflation, you may want to focus on customer retention. So it's important to keep the customers that you currently do have, keep them happy, and focus on providing excellent customer service, offering loyalty programs, and responding promptly to any customer issues. And then finally, try to explore new markets, look for new opportunities to expand your customer base. And one market some entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs ignore is Africa and other parts of the African diaspora. So Black American social entrepreneurs should consider forming robust business relationships and partnerships with potential partners and suppliers within the continent and also in the Caribbean and Latin America. And this will allow social entrepreneurs to access new markets, right? And believe it or not, you know, people are willing to spend money for a good product or service that's based right in the United States. So some of those markets are largely untapped within the continent and Latin America and the Caribbean. So on partnering and expanding your supply chain in those areas can provide that added, those new customers and those new opportunities. And at the same time, you may help create jobs and increase economic opportunities and development. And there are African Americans in the early 1900s who actually had employees and and robust business relationships within the continent. For example, the first Black woman millionaire, Annie Turnbull Malone, not Madam C.J. Walker, but Annie Turnbull Malone. She actually helped Madam C.J. Walker get a start in the beauty business. So Annie Turnbull Malone, she had customers and employees in the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, even in the Philippines, selling her beauty products. So she engaged in helping those women in those parts of the world create an income and help their family. And there are also benefits with connecting with Africa in terms of reducing costs. So partnering in those areas may reduce labor costs and raw material costs. It will help with innovation. So partnering in those regions, it can lead to innovation and new product development. And those insights from partners over there could be leveraged to create new products and services that can be sold in the US and those parts of the world as well. And then it also creates mutual growth. So this can help bridge the gap between our communities and create opportunities for mutual growth via a Pan-Africanist approach. So we need to learn to form relationships in Africa, because you see the Chinese and the Europeans seeing the opportunity over there, and it's high time that African Americans see the opportunities within the continent. So we must embrace a more African-centered approach to social entrepreneurship if we really want to make a meaningful difference, one that values solidarity, social justice, and a regenerative economy. And we need to learn and master areas related to technology, renewable energy, machine learning, and serve our own people, right? And that's important. We need to gain those 10,000 hours in those areas. And we need to forge a greater connectivity with potential partners in Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. And what is sad is that in the early 1900s in this world, people of African descent seem to have a greater Pan-Africanist identity. And there was no social media. And now in this age of social media, we're very disconnected, which is quite unfortunate. But we have to remember, when Africanist diaspora wins, we all win, right? So if Africa is prosperous, it creates an opportunity for African-American social enterprises and businesses to access a new customer base over there, right? So we need to forge greater connections with Africa and its diaspora. And this is just my information. If you see the need to reach out to me, I'm at Leon C. Prieto on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And this is the book cover of a book I wrote a couple of years ago called African American Management History. And the purpose of this book was just to let our students know that we too have a history of enterprise within the United States, within the African American community. And it was informed by philosophies from the continent of Africa. So thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm looking forward to questions.
Thank you so much. That was so rich and just incredibly informative. Do we have any questions from the audience, or just kind of reactions or ideas that people are thinking about after Dr. Prieto's presentation? Any questions, thoughts? If not, I can kind of start us off here. I was really curious about the kind of recession piece of your presentation, about how, let me come on camera, how if you're a small business, right, and you are trying to weather a recession, what do you do? What do you recommend small entrepreneurs do to survive a recession without compromising their values?
Well, of course, during a time of recession, it's a challenge. And you don't want to compromise your values because that's going to, of course, impact the reputation of your organization as well, right? So you just have to find creative way to cut costs and and try to find economies of scale by collaborating with other enterprises to buy certain supplies in bulk. And I know some people may be tempted to reduce the staff hours of employees. That should be a last resort, but try your best to cut costs, find creative ways to bootstrap and even gain new customers. And you may want to increase your online presence, especially in a time of recession, because there's very little economic activity. People don't want to spend their money. So you may have to advertise more creatively by utilizing social media. Like, for example, even things like, TikTok, making short 3-minute free videos to showcase your business in a clever way. So you have to be very creative in doing so. So by utilizing those techniques, you should be able to save your business and advertise it even during hard times without compromising your values. And at the same time, try to find new markets um, outside of the market you currently target.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I think Chantel had a question.
Sure.
Hi, Dr. Prieto. Thank you for your presentation. It was music to my ears. I'm wondering, are there particular industries that you found this model to be effective? And also if you have any insight on like the arts as well, applying this model. Thank you.
Okay. Well, in terms of industry, the companies that I observed utilize this model like during the golden age, it was in the financial services mostly. And there was some retail as well, right? And some related to the beauty industry. In terms of current industry, it can be applied to a number of industries and even the arts, as you just mentioned. And as it relates to the arts, so cultural entrepreneurship is is an approach that can be utilized within the arts, and the arts has to be um, operated from a very sustainable approach as well. And can you can you tell me exactly what area within the arts were you thinking of?
Um, yeah, I'm thinking of doing, I'm thinking from the vantage point of working with communities and serving them through the arts.
Okay, okay. So definitely a cooperative model can be utilized within communities right here in the United States or even communities abroad. And there are a number of companies that, a number of cooperatives that utilize that approach as well in a sustainable manner. And but of course, there are always challenges in terms of acquiring customers, right? So that's where creative forms of advertising are necessary, and also the need to form strategic alliances with maybe corporations that align with your organization values, right? Because values is a very important thing. You may not want to partner with organizations that do not share your values at all. But there are a number of corporations that may be classified as B Corps. Not all of them are socially justice minded. Some are, some aren't. So do your research and see ways in which you can form strategic alliances in terms of maybe finding ways for them to purchase your product and humanize their value chain, because some companies, they're trying to find ways to really make a difference as it relates to racial equity and so forth. And they may want to humanize their value chain or their supply chain. So you may want to partner from that regards.
Thank you for that. Nia.
Thank you. I actually have two questions, and forgive me, the first one may be a bit repetitive. It's resonant of what Paige asked. I was curious if you have opportunity to observe actual businesses and how they're adjusting right now in this current environment, and if you if there's an actual concrete business that you've been able to observe in terms of the adjustments that you're recommending. So I guess kind of like a case study. So if you've had opportunity to observe such. And my second question is, you talked about the opportunity for people to learn about this history as well as different ways of doing business. You're an educator. You're in the classroom. I'm just curious about kind of, I guess, trends you might have noticed, in your classroom in higher education in terms of interest in the topic, and any types of, I guess, projections you would make in terms of interest in this history and in just a different way of doing business.
Yeah, and I'll take the second question first, and then I'll go back to the first question you asked. So yeah, there's a great interest. Most of the students at Clayton State University are African Americans. We are not a PBI, but the demographics shifted in Clayton County. So a lot of African American students, a lot of Latinos and Asian students as well. And they all seem very interested in learning this history. So the thing is not to put on anyone else's history, but just to create a more complete and inclusive curriculum, and they all for it. And then there's also an attention for this topic from other universities as well throughout the US and even the UK. I even have a couple of universities in the United Kingdom, like University of Exeter. They're teaching a class called The History of Black Entrepreneurship, and they're using my book. So there's interest in different parts of the world. And the United States are a little bit slow when it comes to decolonizing the curriculum. That movement is already going on in South Africa, different parts of the continent, and different parts of the world. But the climate, is a little bit rough in certain parts of the United States. So anything related to decolonize or critical race theory, there's a lot of added scrutiny and a lot of negative pushback. And, I'm in Georgia, and there was even a time where some politicians were threatening to look at our syllabi, look at the syllabus to see if we're teaching any radical concepts, But I'm still doing my thing, I'm still teaching what I'm passionate about, and I'm fighting a good fight. And then your first question you asked about if I have any case studies of any companies and how they dealt with the recession and inflation. And unfortunately, we saw a number of good businesses, some that were socially minded, fail, unfortunately. Some were not able to pivot on time, right? Some were not able to take their operations, make it more robustly online, right? But there are some positive stories as well for businesses or social enterprises that pivoted successfully during this time period, during this recession, and a lot of time they were successful due to strategic partnerships they made with larger organizations who were sympathetic to their cause. So a lot of them engage in successful networking before the pandemic, which made it easier. But for those who didn't have those robust networks it was kind of hard to really form relationships during the pandemic, especially when people experienced a recession during the pandemic. So it was challenging to do so. But some of the ways to really pivot is to refine the business model of your social enterprise and try to find multiple ways to generate a revenue stream in a sustainable manner that aligns with your values.
Thank you.
Great. I think Jessica had a question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Prieto. My question relates to the, on one of your slides, you mentioned how there's Asia, Europe, the US, North America are flocking to African countries to, extract resources and whatnot. So my question is, in your opinion, what does resisting that encroachment and extraction of Asia, of Europe in African countries, what would it look like to strategically resist, to strategically protect Black innovation, labor, resources, and time?
Yeah, so there are a number of companies who still have that extractive business model, and they are extracting, and they are working with many dishonest government officials within some of those polities within the Caribbean, within Africa, etc. Right? But there are people who are doing good. There are some companies, for example, for-profit companies right in the US, who decide to utilize a different model that is non-extractive. And there's this one gentleman by the name of Sean Askinosi, and he formed this company called Askinosi Chocolates. And so he works with cooperatives within the Philippines, within Tanzania, and he pays them a fair wage, a fair salary for the cocoa that is produced. So you get them a fair price that is well above market price. So a lot of times when cocoa producers sell cocoa to these large corporations that will remain nameless, you all know them, they pretty much exploit a lot of these cooperatives within Africa and certain parts of Asia. They exploit them. So he found a way to work with them in a transparent manner. So he resisted the urge to exploit, but to actually teach them accounting principles within a language they understood. So he found a way to break down the financials to them in a very coherent manner where they all spoke the same language. So for you and for me, if we are to expand or form partnerships with suppliers within Africa, within Asia, the key is to always remain grounded from that social justice perspective. People are going to criticize you and say, well, you need to make a profit and exploit as much as you can. But that manner of exploitation has caused irreparable harm to this planet. We need to always stay rooted when it comes to that regenerative economics point of view, and ensure that we are more sustainable in our approach, especially with dealing with potential partners and suppliers within the continent.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Janelle has our final question of the evening.
Hi, it's Janelle. Yes, I do. So Western culture is very much rooted in individualism, right? There's a focus on that. And this management model moves us away from that. And just wondering, as we start to look at ways to be more cooperative within business and entrepreneurship, how do we reset our thinking to be more collaborative?
Yeah, so that's why I mentioned the need for us to decolonize our mind first and foremost, So that book, Decolonizing the Mind from Thiongo, the Kenyan writer, and he was very much into the arts. It's important for us to really do the work to get a different outlook, because we have all been indoctrinated into a Western way of thinking, Western humanism. That's what we learned. We didn't learn anything African or indigenous, nothing. So as lifelong learners, for us to reset our minds, we have to engage in learning about our histories, our philosophies. So start by reading Decolonizing the Mind. Start by reading The Racial Contract by Dr. Charles Mills, and other works like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Read some of these works and, and give your brain that detox. Like me, I needed that detox. I studied business management. I studied business during my university years, with the exception of getting my history degree from Harvard. But I was pretty much trained to be an unbridled capitalist. So I needed to relearn everything, to try to inform my students of another approach. And this approach is not popular. Most business schools or most business professors would say I'm talking heresy or talking nonsense, but we need a different approach, because we see how their way is leading us into damnation, and I want to use some stronger words, but this is a PG-13 crowd, so I won't use other words. But we need another approach, and we need it now, because in order to really engage in saving our community, saving this planet, we need a radically different approach, one that incorporates cooperation instead of the individualism that's promoted by the Protestant work ethic.
Thank you.
I just want to say I'll skip my question time to make space.
Yeah, I just had a real quick question. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could share the list of funders who fund cooperative models specifically, because yeah, definitely just brought up, made me think about the gap between funders and the models of solidarity economy, and there is definitely a ways to go to have more funders who understand the value that gets created from these models and has innovative ways to actually fund those models. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure. I could also just share it with Gio, and he could share it with everyone.
Awesome. It looks like it's in the chat too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. Yeah, so there's money out there, not that much, but there is, so the key is just to come up with a unique business model for your social enterprise, But the struggle is real, folks. So I'm not telling you it's all peaches and cream. The struggle is real when it comes to finding funding. So access to funding, it's very challenging, and especially so for Black women. Black women probably receive 0.2% of all venture capitalist funds.
And that actually brings us to time. I appreciate, unless there was something else you wanted to say about that, Dr. Prieto, about that last piece.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, it's a challenge for, um, BIPOC folks to get funding from venture capitalists, and the challenge is even greater for Black women, but let's just face it, we are people who always faced adversity and struggle, and we always find a way out of no way, right? So we still find ways to bootstrap our way to being successful. And there are a number of positive examples of people who defy the odds without access to traditional funding, and they created successful enterprises.
I'd like to welcome some applause. You can unmute if you want. You can also use your hands, use emojis.
Thank you.
I think I don't have better words to say it. This was fantastic.
Thank
I
you.
definitely got a little extra decolonization boost this evening, as did much of you. Please check out our chat, as we have some very helpful notes, and also a shout out to Ujima itself. Yes, Ujima also funds co-ops and other businesses, enterprises, organizations, etc. Please go into our website. One of my colleagues can drop the website in the chat, www.ujimaboston.com, for more info. The notes are also in the chat and can be available. I'll put my email in the chat as well if you need any sort of recap, resources that Dr. Prieto gives us authorization to share. Speaking of authorization to share, this meeting was recorded and can be viewed on YouTube and sent widely throughout your communities, so that you can spread the word to other people who didn't have the time to make it this evening. So I just wanted to say thank you again, Dr. Prieto. This was a fantastic gathering. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Please keep updated. Sign up for Ujima's newsletter via our website link. Send us emails. Send us messages. Keep up with us on social media. We are also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I don't know about TikTok. I'm sorry, doctor, but maybe we get some better presence on there. All right, thank you all for this evening, and we'll be closing out.
Bye, everyone.